beginning with verse number 38 and down to verse number 40, verse number 44. Gospel of John, chapter number is 11, beginning with verse number 38, then down to verse number 40, verse number 44. These are the words coming from the King James Version reading of the Bible, beginning with verse number 38. Jesus therefore again groaning and himself coming to the grave. And there was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. And Jesus said, Take ye away the stone. Martha, the sister of him that was dead, said unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. Jesus said unto her, Say I not unto thee that if thou wouldest believe, thou shalt see the glory of God. Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. And I knew that thou hearest me always. But because of the people which stand by, I say it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. Catch verse 43 and 44. And when he had thus had spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. Jesus said unto them, Loose him and let him go. Amen. There, verse 43 said that he cried with a loud voice. Right there, he cried with a loud voice. And a dead man heard him. Lazarus, come forth. The Bible said he that was dead came forth bound hand and foot with grave clothing, his face bound with a napkin. Jesus looked at him and said to them, Loose him and let him go. That's what I'm talking about, that last clause of verse 44. Loose him and let him go. Amen. This passage that I've selected for a message today is one of the greatest miracles that was performed by Jesus during his earthly public ministry. It is here in John chapter 11 that the Bible reveals that Jesus had befriended this family that is made up of 2 sisters, Mary and Martha, and their brother Lazarus, who lived and took residence there in the city of Bethany. Many theologians believe oftentimes when Jesus was traveling throughout that area, throughout that region, oftentimes he would stay at the home of these sisters, Mary, Martha, and their brother Lazarus. It was there a close relationship had been formed between this family and Jesus throughout his travels round about. It is here in John chapter 11 that the Bible tells us that Jesus' friend, Lazarus, had become ill. Lazarus had become very sick. And that his sisters, Mary and Martha, sent word to Jesus while he was out traveling, doing ministry, and the message simply said in John 11 in verse number 3, Lord, behold whom thou lovest is sick. It is here that a word went out, a message went out. Jesus got news that his friend, Lazarus, one that he loved and one that loved him, had become very ill. One would have thought that Jesus would have got in a hurry. He would have cut his trip short. He would have stopped whatever he was doing to return back to Bethany to be able to check on his friend, the one whom he loved that was sick. Yet the Bible reveals that instead of him going back to Bethany, cutting his trip short and stopping what he was doing, the Jesus shows up in Bethany 4 days later. When he finally arrived there in the city of Bethany, the news is out that Lazarus is dead, that the funeral is over. The grave has been shut, and the family is still in mourning. Even the shortest verse of the Bible, John chapter 11, verse 35 says that when he finally get to Bethany, we find Jesus also weeping, that his friend Lazarus, the one that he loved, is dead, has been buried, and the grave has been shut. 4 days has passed and Jesus got the message that Lazarus was sick, and now Lazarus is dead, and Jesus posed a question to them by simply saying, show me, where have you laid him? It is there in John chapter 11, the latter part of the chapter, that they have made their way down to the graveyard. They're down in the cemetery where they have placed the body of Mary and Martha's brother Lazarus. Bible says Jesus comes to the place. He shows up at the grave. It was a cave. And he knows that there was a stone that had been rolled up to the cave where no man would be able to remove because the dead body of Lazarus was now there. Jesus looked at the crowd around him and said to the crowd, would that someone would take away the stone. Let's reopen this grave where Lazarus is laying. Martha speaks up out of concern about saying, Master, he has been dead now 4 days. And no doubt his body has an odor. No doubt his body has begun to decay. No doubt his body has begun to stink. Because now he has been dead 4 days. Jesus reminds Sister Martha, like it reminded Sister Mary, that if you just believe, God will show you something. Not in the day of resurrection, but God will even show you something if you just believe today. You will be able to experience and see the glory of God. The Bible said they was obedient to the words that came from the mouth of Jesus. The men got together and they took away, or they rolled the stone away from the place where the dead man Lazarus had been laid. Jesus standing there, he took his eyes and looked up towards heaven, and he began to talk to his daddy. He said, Father, I first of all want to thank you, because every time I've called you, you have always heard me. And I even know now that if I call you, you will hear me even now. And I don't call loud and I don't talk in this manner because I think you're hard of hearing, but because of the people which stand by. And I want them to believe that what you're about to do will be proof that you have sent me. The grave is now open. The stone has been rolled away. The crowd standing around wondering what was Jesus about to do. Those that had been followers of him, those that had kept up with his ministry, knew that every time he seemed to show up in town, every time he would come through the neighborhood, that some strange stuff would happen. Times he showed up and folks that was blind, he spit on the ground and made mud cake, put mud on their face and simply said to him, go down to the pool of Siloam and wash your face and see what's going to happen. And the man was obedient to the words of Jesus. And because he trusted his words, the Bible declared that he came back with a new song, shouting and testifying and singing, I was blind, but now I see. There was those that followed him to a wedding reception on one occasion, and when they got there, Jesus' mother had informed them that they was out of wine. She looked at Jesus and said to help him out, and he said to her, woman, what have I to do with thee? But since God had granted him that opportunity to show them that he really was sent by God, he had them to fill up 6 pots with water. And after talking to his heavenly Father, that which was water had become wine. Folk just expected that when he showed up, strange things would take place. Came by the pool of Bethesda one day, a man that had been sick for 38 long years and had been complaining that every time he had tried to get in the pool, when the angel stirred up the water, but somebody kept getting in before him, Jesus looked at him and said to ask the question, will I be made whole? And from that point of disbelieving the words of Jesus, this man got up off his bed, took his bed and laid it across his shoulder, and went back home walking like he had never been lame. It was just expected that whenever Jesus showed up, some strange things would happen. So it is in the text, he shows up in Bethany. Tell somebody 4 days later.
4 days later.
I didn't say 4 days late. 4 days later. For God's time is not always on our time, but God's time is always on time. That's why Big Mama them used to testify that he may not come when you call him, show up when you think you need him, but he's always on time. So 4 days later, after he received the message, after Lazarus has died, after he's been put in the grave, after the cave had been covered up, here he shows up in town, and now he's standing before the open cave. And verse 43 says that he spoke and he cried with a loud voice and says, Lazarus, come forth. Bible declared that he that was dead. And that word was is a verb that is past tense, which simply mean that he ain't dead no more. A dead man heard the voice of Jesus and responded when Jesus called his name. Bible said he that was dead came forth. He was bound. His hands were still bound. He was bound. His feet was still bound. He was bound. His face was still covered. It was bound. He was, catch this, he was out of the grave. But he was still wearing grave clothes. Catch this, he was no longer in the grave, but he was still wearing grave clothes. He was still not free. Jesus declared when he looked at him, listen, if this man is going to be able to do all that I want him to do, we got to undress him. We got to take off his grave clothes. We got to unbound his hands, and we got to unbound his feet, and we got to unbound his face. Jesus says, if you really want him to be all that I want him to be, you got to loose him and let him go. Oh, my brothers and sisters, I wanted to preach this passage and teach this text and stroll through these scriptures today because this scene of Lazarus in the graveyard is much like the scene that still the African Americans, the blacks, the Negroes, the colors and the United States of America still are facing. Our hands, our feet, our faces are still bound. Though they say that we are out of the grave, we're no longer in slavery, yet we as a people still are wearing grave clothes. And we are still not free. Y'all better hear me up in here. I said, like Lazarus in the graveyard, he was out of the grave, still wearing grave clothes. His hands was bound. His feet was bound. His face was covered. His face was bound. He was out the grave, but he was still not free. Yes, as Afro-Americans, as blacks, as Negroes, as colors, in this nation that we call the United States of America, though we're no longer, they say, in slavery. They say we're no longer in bondage, but the truth of the matter is we're still not totally free. Wake up in here. And though you feel like you may have made it because you're able to work where they work and live where they live, drive where they drive, eat where they can eat, I come to tell you, we're still not totally free. And from the beginning, folks trying to make it right for us, they did what they could do, but still, we're not in slavery, but still, we're not free. I mean, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed by President Lincoln in 1863, saying that we was no longer a nation dealing with slavery, and that the Negro was free. But can I tell you, even since the Emancipation Proclamation that was signed by Lincoln in 1863, we're still not free. They signed the Voters' Rights Act of 1965 by President Lyndon B. Johnson. But since the act has been signed in 1965, we're still not totally free. 5 years later, President Nixon signed the Voters' Rights Act in 1970. But we're still not free. 5 years later, President Ford signed the Voters' Rights Act of 1975. But then we're still not totally free. 7 years later, President Ronald Reagan signed the Voters' Rights Act of 1982. But we're still not totally free. 24 years later, President Bush signed the Voters' Rights Act of 2006. But the actions of this nation prove that we're still not free. Listen, Rosa Parks sit on the front seat in December the 1st, 1955. Listen, John F. Kennedy was killed for the rights of people on November 22nd, 1963. Medgar Evers was killed in Mississippi on June 12, 1963. They gunned down Martin Luther King then in Memphis in April the 4th, 1968. Lives has been lost for the cause of our freedom, and some of us think we're there, but I come to tell you, we're still not totally free. Oh, we've been marching, we've been boycotting, we've been picketing across this nation for the past 100 years. But through all of our marches and our boycotts and our picketing, we're still not free. Yes, this nation took a turning point back in 2007 when a black man by the name of Barack Hussein Obama went across this nation shouting, "Yes, we can." When the nation was saying, "No, you can't." In November 2007, this nation came together, and for the first time they voted an Afro-American, a Negro, a colored, in the world, we have raised are still not totally free. Come on, help me here a minute. They told us, get your education. We got educated. Went from associate degrees to bachelor degrees, from bachelor's degrees to master's degrees, from master's to doctorates. In all of our education and doing what they told us we needed to do, we are still not totally free. Oh, but they finally changed the rules and decided they would let us play the game. But then when we started winning the game, they kept changing the rules. And when they let us in the game, they found out we wouldn't just compete in the games. We would become the best of the best. Black man who don't think he's black, but he found out he was black. When he messed up with the white woman, Tiger Woods became the best of the best. Who can swing a club like Tiger Woods? Y'all help me when you can. Two sisters from Campton, California, they finally let them in a tournament. And some of them called them names because of the way they was built. But Venus and Serena, they took the tennis world. From number 1 to number 2. Listen, just this past week, a couple of weeks ago, Serena, even at the old age of tennis of 30-something, went down to Australia. Her good-looking self. And won another tournament, proving we can be the best of the best. Said we couldn't play quarterback. Oh, we had to play running back. We had to chase down the running back. But they messed around and put a quarterback in the hand of Doug Williams. Put him off in the Super Bowl. Threw 5 touchdowns to lead the Redskins to the Super Bowl championship. Never really gave him credit. The first Super Bowl quarterback MVP that didn't have a starting job with the same team the next year, but he proved it. He put the ball in my hand. We can be the best of the best. Put the ball in the hand of Michael Jordan. Cut when he was in high school, but made it through Dayton Smith 3 years. Went to Chicago and took the NBA by storm. 6 for 6 in every championship game he ever played in. We can be the best of the best. But still in this nation, I tell you, we're still not totally free. I hear you thinking, you ain't got chains on your hands. You ain't got chains on your feet. You ain't been told when to get up, when to lay down. You ain't been told when to go, when to come. But actually, when you look over your life, you don't have to go back 100 years. You don't have to go back 50 years. You don't have to go back 25 years. But you can think of some instances just the past few months to prove that as a race, we are still not free. The scene in this text of Lazarus coming out of the grave proves to me we are still not totally free. Look at the scene. Jesus now shows up at the graveyard. He's standing before the open grave. And now he's called Lazarus out of the grave. The text says that which was dead came walking forward. Yet he was still in his grave clothes. He's standing there before Jesus in the crowd. But when they looked at his hands was bound. When they looked at his feet, they was bound. When they looked at his face, it was still bound. The text says, though he was out of the grave, he still had on grave clothes. He was out of bondage, but he was still bound. You're going to catch it on the way home. I said, he was out of the grave, still hands are bound. His feet are bound. His face is bound. grave clothes. He's out of bondage, yet he is still bound. Bound hands mean his hands have been restricted. Bound feet mean his feet had been restricted. A bound face mean his vision had been restricted. Out of the grave. Out of the grave. But still dressed in grave clothes. Out of bondage. But still dressed in bound clothes. Oh, my brother and sister, when you see Lazarus standing in the text, this is the scene of the Afro-Americans even in this free country right now. We've been told that we are out of slavery, but they're still trying to dress us in slave clothes. Hands are bound. Our feet are bound. Our faces are bound. They are saying you're no longer slaves, but in many of their eyesight, we are still wearing slave clothes. They are saying we're out of bondage, yet in many areas we're still bound. Bound politically, bound financially, bound with all of these disparities. Yet they're saying we are free, but we are free without freedom. Y'all gonna hear me? I said we're bound, I tell you, politically. Yes, we've been able to occupy the seats of city councilmen. We've been able to occupy the seats of city mayors. We've been able to occupy the seats of state legislators. We've been able to occupy the seat of becoming state governors. And even now, we're able to occupy the highest seat in the world. Black man by the name of Barack Obama sitting in the seat of the White House. Yet, on every political turn, they are trying to bind him. They're trying to restrict him. And whether you want to believe it or not, it's not that the man don't have education. It's not that they can't testify that he is probably the most smartest president that this nation has ever had to lead them. It's not that he don't have the wisdom, not that he don't have the know-how. Yet, when Dr. King says, let me be judged, not by the color of my skin, but by the content of my character. This president has been bound not because he didn't have the knowledge, not because he didn't have the wisdom, but because his skin pigmentation is brown. Y'all help me when you can. But I like that brother. Matter of fact, and I just gonna testify, I love that brother. There's got to be my brother from another mother. He stood in the State of the Union address and made one wise statement. I said, I really don't have an agenda now, because I'm not going to be running for president again. And there was some folk that don't look like us decided they would clap. But God gave that brother some wisdom to remind them. The reason why I can't run again is because I won the last 2 elections. It was time for me to cut off the television. That brother was on point. The smartest president ever led this nation, yet politically, they're still trying to restrict us and bind us. They try to restrict and bind us, yes, even financially. Ain't it strange? You can go down and talk to your local banker who will smile in your face, shake your hand, and will even give you a loan for a car, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, maybe y'all feeling me? He trusts you to drive a $100,000 Mercedes-Benz. He trusts you to live in a $200,000 or $300,000 house. But he can't trust you to let you borrow $25,000 to open up your small business in your local. We are restricted by the color of our skin and not the content of our character. Even in education, I tell you, we've been able to be the best of the best. And give an opportunity, we can prove we can do more than bounce a basketball. We can do more than hit a baseball. We can do more than run with a football. No, we can have it up here. And we can be the best of the best. They say we can't learn. So then I think the problem is they can't teach. When we have been taught, we prove we can be the best of the best. And I don't know, really educationally, if really this thing of desegregation did us a favor. Because when we was in our own school, had our own teachers, they made us believe we was going to be the best of the best. And they did not take failure as a result from any child. There was no child put off in no room. There was no child sent down the hallway off to a corner. No, them teachers that look like me. And one of the best for me, every now and then they pulled me out the room, put some on me, and reminded me, you won't fall through the cracks. You're going to be somebody. We've been bound politically. We've been bound financially. We've been bound, educationally. So in this text, this is what they done to Lazarus. And the same thing they've done to the African-American race today. First of all, catch this, write it down. You need this. They tied his hands. Tell somebody they tied his hands. They tied his hand because they wanted to control what he could do. I said they tied his hands to control what he could do. A dead man with tied hands can do nothing. But the flip side, they tied our hands because they want to control what we can do. Lazarus was a dead man with tied hands, but in this country, we are living men, yet with tied hands, trying to control what we can and cannot do. You can have some of the best ideals. You can have some visions out of this world, but they want to tie your hands, trying to control what you can and cannot do. But when given an opportunity, tell somebody we can do it. Tell them we have done it. And we shall do it again. I said, when given the opportunity, only we can determine our own destiny with untied hands. So they tied his hands to control this dead man. What he could or could not do, but as living men, they have tied our hands, trying to control what we can and cannot do. Secondly, catch this, they bound his feet to control where he could go. Here you got the picture here of a dead man with bound feet. The dead man with bound feet couldn't go nowhere. Like a dead man with tied hands could not do nothing. A dead man with bound feet could not go anywhere. But even in this country now, we are living men with bound feet. And they're trying to control where we go. As a little boy, I was oftentimes told by some folk who were trying to follow the rules of the culture at that time, boy, you can't go in there. Boy, you can't go there. Boy, you're not allowed to invade there, because there was some restrictions and some boundaries that we as a people was told we could not cross. Yes, we are living men. We claim to be in a free country, but we really don't have the freedom to go really where we. Can I just be honest? They will pull 2 or 3 of us in that they feel like they would not be verbal, nor vocal, nor radical, nor racist, to make sure that the picture they are trying to paint will come to fruition. Oh yes, you ask them, you ask them, do you have a problem with Afro-Americans? And they'll tell you, oh, I have black friends. Y'all heard that before? Ask them where their black friends live. Ask them have they been in the homes of their black friends. Better yet, ask them have their black friends been in their homes. Ask them do they know the name of their black friends' children. Matter of fact, ask them do they know the middle name of their black friends. Ask them whether they hang out when they come to their black friends. Yes, they try to bind our feet to control where we go. Who would have thought we would have a chance to go to city council years ago? Who would have thought we had a chance to go to the mayor's office years ago? Who would have thought we had a chance to go even into the ring of state politics and legislators and representatives and senators years ago? Who would have thought we would have been able to go into the White House and be the president years ago? They try to bind our feet and control where we go. First, they finally not only did they tie his hands, and not only did they bind his feet, tell somebody they covered his face. He was a dead man. His face is covered. They were trying to control what he could see. Dead man, tied hands, could do nothing. A dead man with bound feet could go nowhere. Now, dead man with covered face, his vision would always be just a blur. Yet Lazarus was a dead man with a covered face, and a dead man with a covered face could see nothing. Here we are now, living men, and they're still trying to cover our face as a sign to control what we can see. Because believe me, my brothers and sisters, every time we've been able to see it, every time we've been able to believe it, we've been able to achieve it. You better write that down, I said. Every time we've been able to see it, and every time we've been able to believe it, we've been able to achieve it. One thing about the people of God, those who really believe in Him, they know that we don't walk by sight. We walk by faith. And even though it may not have come to pass yet, with our spiritual visions and with our belief in God, we believe He will bring it to pass. he was not able to get a vision and a view of them. So what the master said that you got to do is untie his hands. And what you got to do is unbound his feet. And then remove the napkin and the covering off of his face. Remember now, before the Lord got there, he was called a dead man. But now he's being loosened and set free. He now has become alive again. And when we see him, he's no longer living in the graveyard. When you get to chapter 12, he's sitting at a banquet table beside Jesus. And the good news how he moved from the graveyard to sitting at a banquet table. How he moved from being a dead man to becoming a guest at a banquet. How he moved from being a man of the past to a man that being celebrated for his future. All of that took place because they unbind him. They untied his hands, unbound his feet, and uncovered his face. And now he's a guest at the banquet. My brothers and sisters, that's what God has in store for you. That's what God has in store for me. He wants to move from the graveyard to the banquet hall. He wants to move from wearing grave clothes to having on the banquet attire. Wants to move from living in the past to having a bright future. Y'all help me. He says right here, loose him and let him go. And the Bible says in John chapter 12, around verse 32, if you accept him as Savior Lord, you will discover that whom the Son of Man set free, he's free indeed. Tell somebody he came to set free the captive and declare them is the year of Jubilee. Tied his hands, bound his feet, and covered his face. But when he was set free, he became the guest at the banquet. He became a man with a future. And the good news, don't have to stay tied up. Don't have to stay bound. Your future will remain a blood. And I got good news. The freedom is coming. I said I got good news. That freedom is on the way. There was another man 2,000 years ago. You know what they did to him, don't you? They tied his hands. They bound his feet. They covered his face with a crown of thorns. Took a cross and led him a Calvary. Took his hands, tied him to the cross. Put nails in his hand, trying to control what he could do. Took his feet, tied him to the cross. And that's what we got to do. We got to put it in the hand of the Lord. And when we put it in His hand, in due time, He'll bring it to pass. Y'all hear me? That's why Big Mama used to shout, Father, I stretch under my hand to thee. No other help I know. Y'all know the story. On Friday, they thought it was over. Tied hands, bound feet, in a covered face, took him down and laid him in a cave, rolled the stone on the cave, all Friday night, right down, all Saturday, right down. let him go. You say he's out of the grave, then take off his grave clothes. You say he's out of slavery, then take off his slave clothes. You say he's no longer in bondage, then stop trying to bind him and restrict him on what God wanted him to do, what God wanted him to go, and what God wanted him to see. I'll say to our people today, we walk by faith and not by sight. What we can see by faith and what we can believe in our spirit, God will bring it to pass. My grandmother, before she checked out of here, she never thought she would see the day the black man would occupy the White House. And many older people, they just shedded tears, not tears of sorrow, but tears of joy, because they lived during that time when they were not even able to go down to the poll and even check a mark just to vote. But to have the opportunity to walk in a poll and see a black man's name on the ballot and have the opportunity to say, this is my president. We've come a long ways. We've got a long ways to go. It's ironic to me, I've been here 10 years, that when President George Bush was the president of the United States, each time we would go to Fort Snelling, and they would present the flag. Y'all check it out when you go out there. They would present the flag to a family. They would proudly say, on the behalf of President George Bush, President of the United States of America, we present you this flag. Since 2008, I'm still going to Fort Snelling. And what I hear now is, on the behalf of the President of the United States of America, we present you this flag. It's still a sad day when white folks don't even want to call the president's name. We've come a long ways, but we still have a long ways to go. We say to this nation, he's out the grave, so take off his grave clothes. He's out of slavery, take off his slave clothes. If he's no longer in bondage, then stop binding him so he can be all that God would have him to be. The doors of the church is open. You're here. As we stand together now for the call to discipleship, if you're here today, you're not saved, you don't have a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ, and you have not publicly came before the church to say, I want to be saved, and I want to accept Jesus Christ as the Savior of my life,